Welcome to the Learning Reimagined podcast, where we discuss solutions to employee training and development challenges in the Caribbean. We speak with Caribbean professionals who are experts at helping people in Caribbean organizations excel. And we want to help you, our Caribbean audience, level up your teams, your employees, so that your businesses can succeed. Welcome to episode 3 of the Learning Reimagined podcast. I'm your host, Christine McLean-Lewis, and today I have with me Krystal Tomlinson. Over the last 5 years, Krystal has worked with teams in both the public and private sectors across the world to assess the emotional intelligence within their teams, design EQ-based productivity tools and processes, and improve internal conflict resolution and communication practices to build trust, enhance work-life balance, and improve job satisfaction. So, Krystal.
Hi, Christine. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again. Thank you so much for being here. And I love the work that you've been doing in the emotional intelligence space. Rochelle James recommended that you're one of the best emotional intelligence trainers out there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you.
So I'm happy to have you in this discussion today. And what we want to really focus on is not only emotional intelligence training from the perspective of courses and those long-winded things that employees have to go through sometimes, but also looking at it from the perspective of how to apply it outside of the training and get people to actually be emotionally intelligent, right? So my first question, for those who may not know what emotional intelligence is, can you define it in the simplest way possible?
Sure. So it is an awareness of the emotions that you're feeling, understanding why you are feeling that emotion or set of emotions, because sometimes it's more than one, and then having the tools available to manage the emotion. Where most persons have the difficulty, funny enough, is understanding what they're feeling. And so because they don't understand what this sensation is that's going through my body, they can't identify properly the cause of it. And it makes it doubly hard to come up with a strategy to manage that feeling. So if an individual is to be considered emotionally intelligent, it's someone who, as an example, knows that they are feeling shame, understands that I feel shame because I'm carrying guilt about a lie that I told that has been found out. And to manage this shame, I'm not going to lash out at somebody who says a thing that hurts me. I'm going to work on self-compassion and self-forgiveness because I'm only feeling this level of vulnerability because I'm dealing with personal guilt. In the workspace, you may find people who are aggressive, impatient, unkind, and you think it's a personality trait when truly they are managing an emotion that they have not even been able to name and therefore can't handle it in a responsible way. And so it comes off in negative behavior. But fundamentally, knowing and being able to name the emotion, understanding where that emotion is coming from, and having a set of tools available to manage that so it doesn't display itself in negative behaviors.
That's very powerful. And that leads me to another question about how long does it take to actually get emotional training done, if that's the case? How do you get people to get this sense of awareness about themselves?
So unfortunately, this is a skill that we should all have learned the minute we came out of our mother's bellies, because emotions are driving everything. It drives our behavior and how we create community and relationships with others. It drives the standards that we have for how people will treat us. So if my sense of self-awareness is very low, I end up looking to my partner to affirm my beauty, to affirm my worth. Nobody taught me how to identify myself and what self is feeling. And so I look around expecting others to do it for me. And so it compromises the quality of self-communion that I can have, my relationship with me. Right. And if I can't manage my relationship with me, you can't expect me to have healthy relationships with others. So when we think about how long it will take, it's a lifetime practice. But unfortunately, it's very rare that anybody will have the experience, the exposure, the training with developing their own personal set of tools from childhood into adulthood. Not impossible, but that's not our reality right now. And so the onus and the burden lands on two spaces of socialization. One is the school. If we can get in our school curriculum genuine focus on self-management and building emotional intelligence, we create more responsible, aware, productive, confident, caring, loving individuals going into society. Unfortunately, the curriculum in school now is overwhelmed with academic and intellectual work. And where you do have little pockets and bursts of emotional intelligence work, maybe in your guidance counseling class, maybe through the religious education class, probably through your extracurricular activities where you're learning team building and how to gauge and manage your emotion when you get a red card, right? Except in those moments, it's not built into the curriculum. But that would be a great place to start. And a second place to do that, and I think where it actually ends up happening the most, is in the workplace. But unfortunately, by the time you come into the workplace, you're dealing with grown adults who have years of built up trauma and ways that they're dealing with that trauma. A large ego that tells you I've learned everything, I know everything already, and I wouldn't be in this position if I'm not smart and intelligent and have all my competencies. And so if they don't have a mind open to learning, the task is now on sometimes a small human resource department to create a growth mindset in a team of persons, right? Who believe that I have it all figured out, and to suggest otherwise is an offense to me. So again, not impossible, but it is harder to do the longer we take to do it. Once it gets done, though, it's the general repetition of the principles, going back always to the foundation that my emotions are data. I'm not going to judge the emotion. I feel this. It has some information. What is it telling me? And what tools do I have to manage this in a healthy way, or to use this data to take a healthy decision? So once we start, it opens a world of possibilities. And if we continue to repeat, to practice, just religiously, creating a culture that supports it, that nourishes, encourages, rewards it in the workspace, which is a controlled environment, it increases the EQ among your team members. And the beauty of it is, they're able to transfer that knowledge and that skill. They transfer it into the household. They transfer it at the checkout counter in the supermarket. They're transferring it on social media when they're responding to comment threads and dealing with abusive attacks online. It's a skill that you can move easily, fluidly into other domains of life. So it's hard to start in the workplace, but I'm begging that we start there, because it's like the last space that we have a chance at helping persons to understand what they're feeling and using that to make intelligent decisions.
Definitely. And it's such a powerful thing that I don't think many organizations or people realize. As you said, a lot of people have huge egos and they get so caught up in the ego and thinking, oh, I know this. Why do I have to learn this? You know, we need to change that stigma in the workplace. So getting into your work as an emotional intelligence trainer, what inspired you to start doing emotional intelligence training? I was
kind of forced into the space from an experience I had with a team leader. So I was working in a company at the time, and a very, very senior leader of the team, who I didn't report to directly, but who I reported to, had an interface with them. So in some ways, I was accountable to them through my direct manager. And there was an instance where we had a very important meeting, 2 meetings that were happening back to back. So the first meeting happened, some actions and outcomes were agreed on, and those actions were assigned to that very senior team leader. And remember, I don't report directly to them, but I was in the meeting because the streams of work coincide. And when the second meeting was due, the person did not recall what those deliverables were that they had. Maybe they were overwhelmed. I don't know what it was. But it came to the morning of the meeting and they weren't prepared to give their update and their report. Right. And they blew the entire fuse on me, right? So because I was in the room, I was publicly shamed about being incompetent and not taking my job seriously and not doing what it was clearly my responsibility to do, which was remind him to do the work. No. This is happening in the open workspace, right? So there are at least 20 or 25 persons who are seeing this exchange, not even exchange because I wasn't responding, but seeing this play out, hearing what they had to say, and just observing all of what that moment carried with it. And I said to myself, how do I want to respond here? Because I'm being attacked. And that sets off all kinds of primal circuitry in the brain, because why am I going to stand here and allow myself to be attacked? I'm going to fight you back with words, of course. So one, how do I want to respond to this? Two, why is this person at this level of leadership and unable to admit that they have made a mistake? Like that is something wrong with the company culture, that they could feel so emboldened in their error to publicly shame somebody who should be learning from them, being mentored by them in front of other people too, which will impact workplace culture. How did the office get to this point? And it's in that moment of reflection I realized, because nobody trained him otherwise. They expected that because he was brilliant and good at a particular job function and could show up under pressure and under stress, he would know how to manage a team. He would know how to manage pressure when it came on to him failing or not being able to get something done. It was just assumed. So that moment and that process of reflection, I said to myself, well, let's figure out how you, Krystal, can avoid becoming this kind of person, because anybody can forget to execute an important task. Anybody can come to a moment of pressure. Anybody can feel embarrassed about failing to do what they're supposed to do. But I don't want to get to this place where I respond in this way. And so I started to do research on it, reading on it, registered to do a certificate course on the science of happiness through UC Berkeley, which introduced me to the field of emotional intelligence. Because at first I was calling it leadership, team management, how do you handle emotions? And so as I'm researching, I'm realizing this is an entire field of study. And this is something directly related to the bottom line of companies. When the environment is emotionally unhealthy, when you have persons with low EQ and high IQ leading teams, the attrition rate on those teams are high. The sense of job satisfaction is low. The quarrels that they have around compensation and being paid fairly, frequent and regular, because they don't feel they are recognized and their work is valued, because your low EQ team member doesn't make them feel valued. So what do I go next? I want more pay, right? I want to overworking me. I want to disrespecting me pan top of it. I want more pay. And so you find a lot more of those conversations about being undervalued in the workplace, looking for another job. And the employee thinks that what they're looking for is more money. Some people will move and take another job that pays them less. Some people will move into charity spaces where they're getting no pay at all, right, because now they feel valued. And so as I was doing that research, doing the studying, equipping myself to be able to teach other teams and persons who were leading, that is how the work became what it is. So I resigned from that particular job. I was in media for a while too, stepped away a little bit because this requires a lot of reading, training, and sharpening of skills. And then, of course, putting those things into practice. So testing what you think you understand, working with teams to also test the tools that you've been exposed to, and then watching through comparative, baseline, where did we start? Where are we now? How those tools are actually helping them to improve the job satisfaction, the sense of safety in the workplace, the sense that you are valued, and maybe every reporting period, I'm not going to ask for a raise, but I'm going to ask for something else. So when companies see that it has a positive effect on their bottom line, of course, they get a little bit more invested. But that's one of the challenges of emotional intelligence coaching. The instant gratification culture that we have makes people want to see tomorrow. You just did the training. I needed to be emotionally intelligent tomorrow.
But it doesn't work that way.
Time.
Right.
It takes time.
And in your experience, Krystal, how long does emotional intelligence training take?
So there are two ways to answer that question. One is it's a lifetime discipline, because you can get into a streak of good habits and good responses to your behavior, healthy use of your emotional data. And then something traumatic happens. You suffer a loss, you lose your job, you do everything right, and you still don't get the reward you're looking for. And that can cause a sort of emotional relapse. So it's something you have to be focused on every single day until the end of your days, so you can keep practicing it, right? But in terms of training in the corporate space, where we start with training, we usually recommend no less than a 3-hour training session, and we tackle one area of emotional intelligence, work with the team to assess their baseline on it, come to some shared agreements around what tools we're going to use to manage how this particular response is coming up in the workplace around self-awareness or around social awareness, your ability to stay alert and recognize what's happening in your team and respond appropriately. We develop the tools, and then I encourage them to use at least a 30-day window to put those things in play. I check back in at the end of the month. We see what the responses are, what needs to be tweaked. And then over a quarter, we're able to measure on this metric where we started, the reports that you were getting, the feedback that was coming in from staff members, things like absenteeism and lateness. We can use that to create a baseline. How many of your team members are just not showing up for work? How often are they sick without an explanation? How are they operating with deadlines and responding to queries about missed deadlines? The attitude, what kind of reports are coming into the HR department? What's the language that they're using to make that report? So we use that to create a baseline, agree on the tools that we will use, test it for a 30-day period, tweak, and then we go another 60 days to see how it works, and then look at the data we have versus where we started. So I'd say a good window is a quarter, but we start with a minimum of 3 hours to just establish where we are, what's the key problem that we're trying to solve, and what tools can we design based on your workplace culture to respond to those set of challenges. But it's always important to do the work and then come back and assess to see what has worked.
And I have 2 questions from that. So first question, you mentioned emotional intelligence tools a lot. What are emotional intelligence tools, really?
So those tools are really personal tools. It's not even something that the company can have written down to say, when we are angry, we do this, right? It's personal. So you may find that you're working in a team where anger issues are showing up. And people are angry for different reasons. Sometimes they don't feel valued in the job. And so there has to be a way to respond when you feel job dissatisfaction. How do I ensure that that is in fact what is going on? How do I express that sense of not being valued in my workspace? Is there a safe place to share this with my team leader? Is there a set of principles that undergird how we respond to people's work? Am I working in a team or am I working in a silo and feeling disconnected, which is part of why I don't feel valued? Somebody else's anger could be coming from handling a divorce at home and showing up to work exhausted, mixed in with a little bit of depression and sadness at the failure and loss of that relationship, dealing with a teenager who's not handling that separation well, getting calls from school to come in, break your work day to go and deal with that. Right. And so by the time you get back in the office and you hear somebody say, Miss So-and-so, weren't you supposed to send me the thing? Of all the things going wrong in my life right now, is this foolishness you're asking me? And so you see their anger come up. Right. And so it's important to help them as well, creating a safe space to express. I'm experiencing this challenge at home. It's affecting me in this way. And I have the emotional skills to ask for space and grace from my team. So it requires me, the individual, knowing what I need, I have to know what I'm feeling. It's not, this person is so unreasonable. They're always late with their work and me late one time and it's a problem. That's not the issue you're having. The issue you're having is you might need to take 3 vacation days to work through this. You might need to ask for a week because this is the real emotion that you're feeling, sadness at the loss of a relationship. And because you don't have the space to process that with all that's going on, it's creating irritation from the loss of sleep and coming out as if this person is unreasonable for thinking that my work is late.
Right.
So if you know what you're feeling, that's a self-awareness, you understand where the feeling is coming from, but you don't have the tools to regulate it, it's important for the workplace now to also have a place where you can co-create those solutions if you need help to, or referencing how other people have managed this and offer some practices for that. One that works very well in workspaces as a general practice is meditation and deep breathing. It's amazing how much of our anxiety and stress comes because there's not enough oxygen in our body. There is not enough oxygen. What do we need oxygen for? The brain. Your brain is assessing situations. Your brain is reading emotional cues from other people and body language. All of those things that are expressed in your behavior first begin as a thought in the brain. And sometimes all we need is a little oxygen, some deep breaths. There's somebody showing you how to breathe. Like a lot of us don't know how to breathe. We get angry and we go. and that's not oxygen going into your brain. So sometimes using a meeting, the start of a meeting, to invite people into a deep breathing practice to get them calm. They're coming into the meeting with tension. They're coming in expecting to be attacked and for their work to be torn to shreds. They think they're about to lose their job. And so the energy in the room just changes with deep breathing. Let's get some oxygen in the brain first before we start to talk to each other, before we try to listen to each other. Meditation is also a good practice, which is to learn how to stop your thoughts, but also learn how to catch and interrogate them before you make a decision. So the highest form of meditation is being able to sit in stillness with no thought in your head. Why are thoughts a problem sometimes? Let's say I walk into the room and I say, "Good morning, Christine, how are you?" And you go, "Morning." No, a thought just comes into my head. What am I do, Christine? I wonder if she not like me. You know, probably the time when she did email me, I never replied to the email. Jesus Christ, she thinks I'm unprofessional. She not going to want to work with me again, you know. Make me not bother sit down beside her because it look like she don't want to talk to me today. I'm going to sit down over here. So, and I have 13 thoughts from Christine just saying good morning in a way that sounded weird to me. Right. So sometimes in that stillness now, when we do Christine, hold on. Christine, you okay? Versus sitting down in the thought and allowing it to take me 13 thoughts into, you know, me not like her neither because, you know, the last time she don't have no manners. And then I go somewhere and I tell some, imagine I told her good morning and the girl don't even look at me. And so we create gossip around it. We create division around it. In that moment when I have that thought, meditation allows me to be aware of this negative thought I have coming out of an interpretation of your behavior. Is this a moment to engage Christine before I go into that spiral of thinking? And I say, "Christine, you all right?" It gives Christine an opportunity for in a workspace that encourages honesty. And that's the importance of workplace culture, right? Workplace encourages honesty. And Christine can say to me, "You know, I just read something on Instagram and it threw me off. I just see a story. I just saw a comment. Somebody just sent something in a group and why may I wonder if we just take a moment." I then get to contextualize your lackluster morning. And I can decide now, emotional intelligence again, how do I respond with this social awareness? How do I respond to that which you have said? Right. Do I engage with empathy? Do I ask, you know, some more questions? Is this a moment where I give you a hug? Do I recommend something that I've used to deal with that to be supportive? Right. And so we create a relationship versus me going sit into the back of the room thinking Christine don't like me. And so to respond to that sense that I am being rejected by Christine, let me just reject back Christine and don't talk to her. And then the thing she say in the meeting, I'm going to just roll my eye because she don't have no manners. So that is how emotional intelligence could work and play out in a very practical way in the workplace, just how we've said good morning to each other.
Makes sense. And another thing that you have mentioned a lot too is workplace culture. Now, workplace culture is something that's very difficult to change. So in trying to make emotional intelligence work, how do you help companies adapt their workplace culture to accommodate for better emotional intelligence?
So one of the things I am keen to observe is who that team leader or team member thinks needs the training. So sometimes the director of human resources or the CEO or the chief operations manager reaches out and says, "Listen, I'm having a challenge with my team. They are not emotionally intelligent." That tells me that the individual believes that they already are, right? So I have the intelligence and my team does not have it. Versus a different use of language, which is, "I'm having a challenge in my team and I think we could all do with some so-and-so because our and us." That also tells me where that team leader thinks they are and the help that they need to support their team. So to answer the question more directly, in terms of changing workplace culture, it starts at the top. And if the leadership of the team is not prepared to handle their own emotional challenges with regulating themselves, demonstrating each day how we take on this question of self-awareness, what we do with hard emotions, how we talk to each other as we're trying to process and regulate ourselves, how do we show up with empathy while still getting the work done productively because we can't hug our way through the day, right? But how do we deal with that and still get the work done? How do I respond when I'm disappointed? What language do I use when I'm engaged in conflict? The leadership of the team has to demonstrate that. The second step would be establishing principles on how we're handling emotionally charged and challenging situations. You're going through a company restructuring. You're losing a critical member of the team. We're going to be doing some downsizing, or we're going to let some people go. Those are emotionally charged situations. What are the principles around how we deal with these things? So some of those principles practically could mean we, as a company, we don't send dismissal emails. We call a meeting with the individual who is being dismissed. We have a standard of giving them at least 3 months notice, because we know it's hard to find jobs and people have obligations. We sit with them and we go over practically the value of the work that they have given the company so far, and indicate in honest language why we have to let them go. It's not that they are bad employees or their function is no longer necessary. We're really just not making a profit, right? No, it's easier to say we're going to have to let you go because you're not contributing at the level and the standard, and make the person feel bad. Right. So you don't have to tell the truth that my mandate has shifted. We're entering some new markets and we need to find a way to stop spending in this line item. And we've done the assessment. We don't want to let anybody go, but I don't have an option to not let anybody go. And so these are the reasons why we have to dismiss you from this post. Right. And just, I think sometimes too, how we display respect in some of those situations. You can fire somebody and they walk out of the room smiling, shaking your hand, thanking you, being understanding, going out there to be an advocate, to help others deal with being dismissed. So if we have principles on how we do things, it doesn't start to feel personal. So nobody gets to say, when they were firing Krystal, they gave Krystal 3 months notice. But when they were firing Stacey, they told her with 1 week's notice and reminded her that that's what the contract agreed to, 1 week's dismissal notice. So Stacey doesn't get to say it's a personal attack on me. Stacey doesn't get to say they don't like me. Because the company has a culture and a way with which we do things. So if a company at the head has a set of leaders who understand the importance of emotions and creates a space where it is safe for us to express what we truly feel, enable people to have the language to express that respectfully, link them in, if necessary, to the tools that they can use to do that self-regulation and management, and then undergird that with a sense of principle. So it's not me think so and I believe that and this happens because it's you. It's just the principles for how we make decisions. It's the principles for how we deal with conflict. It's principles around how we give feedback. It's principles about our pay cycle. We always pay people before the week of the 25th. When we are giving feedback, we give feedback. We give feedback in closed doors. But when we're giving commendations, we do that loudly with balloons and noise and music. We just have a standard at which we operate that creates safety, a sense of reliability, so I can trust this company to treat with things in this way. I don't have to sit down with the 35 thoughts and wonder if I am next, what's going to happen to me? Because no. Company has principles around how they deal with these things. So those are 2 ways to begin to rewire the company culture. And then, of course, constantly checking in to ensure that teams are honoring these processes, and where people feel a sense of injustice, a sense of unfairness, they can also feel safe in saying, I know we say that this is a principle. I know we say that this is how we do business. But I noticed that a customer email came in and it was 3 weeks before that customer got a response. And I think if we don't do something now, it compromises the high standards we have for customer service. And the customer service manager doesn't go, so why them tell you that? Why them never come tell me that? No, customer service manager knows that this is the process. This is the principle. I'm supposed to share the feedback in this way. Right. So it's not that I'm hiding something from you, but I'm just following a process. Right. So it feels safer, cleaner, and enables truth-telling. There's a lot of truth-telling missing from corporate spaces, but that's because we also doubt other people's ability to manage emotions. So I think if I tell you the truth, you're going to be hurt and you don't know how to handle hurt well, so you won't like me. I've just made a judgment about your emotional capacity. And so you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to tell you a lie.
So true.
So you can build trust. And 2 more ways that we can look to infuse emotional intelligence as part of the company culture is to invest in company-wide training. So after we have trained our senior leaders or middle managers, ensure that it filters down, because as I said in the beginning, nowhere in their lives are persons getting this level of training before coming into the workspace? So if we want them to truly understand and accept it, we have to train our team members when they come in. And then looking specifically now at new hires, when you're hiring new people to come into your team, test for emotional intelligence, because people can have it without knowing they have it. And I find that this is one of the ways where teams are getting better at recruiting, because the questions they're asking you around assessing your ability to manage conflict, to respond in an agile way to difficult circumstances, to chart a path through in terms of resilience, bouncing back. The questions that are being asked in these interviews are leaning more to those kinds of assessments. So wanting to see if somebody has that kind of personal or social intelligence to make good decisions in difficult, highly charged situations. So those four things I think can create a true culture. The senior managers understanding, accepting, and putting those things into practice, building out principles for the organization that everybody has to be bound by, investing the time, the money, because budget is needed for company-wide training so it can truly become culture. And then when others are coming into your well-curated culture of emotional intelligence, you ensure that you're picking the right people.
Definitely. And that leads to two things, right? So the first thing, you spoke about training. What should be done before, during, and after training when you're dealing with emotional intelligence?
So I'll say again, it has to start with the senior managers and team leaders accepting it, because you also can't start at the bottom, teaching your frontline staff. And then when they come to work, the person who's managing them is not demonstrating any of these skills that you're asking me to demonstrate. Hold on, that's an injustice, and I'm going to push back. So the buy-in from the beacons, the lighthouses in the company is important. Establishing too the need for it. So when we say we want to do emotional intelligence, what is the need that you're trying to satisfy? You can't approach it from wanting to do this brand new age thing. Everybody's talking about emotional intelligence. Let me just make sure that my team has emotional intelligence training. What are the problems that you're looking to solve? Are you honest enough in being able to dissect the issues related to the lack of self-awareness, the lack of self-regulation, the lack of social awareness and empathy, the lack of the ability to lead others and influence them to take decisions? What is the problem you're looking to solve with an emotional intelligence training? Because we don't have a lot of time, and quite often they don't have a whole heap of money up front to invest in everybody getting trained. Right. So when we're clear on what the problem is we want to solve, then we can be deliberate now about creating a baseline. Once we create that baseline and we have the data, we ensure that the tools that we're using are sufficient to answer those problems and to change the data we're seeing at the baseline. And so the during is the development of the tools. The during is putting it into practice. The during is the periodic measurement to make sure that we're actually doing it in the workspace. The during is creating a safe space where people can self-report. This week I came into the office and I didn't feel this way, or I really felt this way. This person contributed to a healthy workspace. Do we create a reward-rich culture now to inspire people to continue doing it? Are we looking for ways to infuse this? Do we start meetings with a particular practice? Pause meetings to reflect on this? End meetings in a certain way? So everywhere you look in the office, it's just like, we're doing it. That's the during. And then the after is always to measure again against the baseline. Right. See where we are, how far we've come, what we need to drill into a little bit more. How do we want to expand this? Who else do we want to include? And you chart a way forward with information. So that's how I see the after phase happening, using that data now to make a series of better decisions in the future.
And the second thing that I wanted to dive into, onboarding new hires, right? How do we, because yes, we want to ask the right questions during the interview process and therefore weed out the people who probably wouldn't be a good fit based on their EQ. But some people, nobody has perfect EQ, right? Yeah. So when those people who don't have perfect EQ come in, how do we mold them into the culture that we want them to be a part of?
So they end up, and this is human behavior now, we want to fit in. By and large, we want to be a part of the community. We want to feel accepted. We want to feel worthy. And so if the culture of the company is as the company managers think it is, where we have a high EQ space, we have a healthy workplace culture, the new person who comes in, unless they are extremely calculating and just have like a real psychotic problem, They're not walking in there every day to say, let me see how I can destroy this culture. Moo, ha, 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 ha. That's not what they're doing. They're trying to figure out how they can locate themselves into a team, how they can begin to benefit in the way they're seeing other people benefit from this culture, be rewarded, be promoted. That's what they're looking for. So if they learn that promotion comes through doing this, that, and the other, a raise in pay comes through this, that, and the other, receiving your monthly reward and recognition from the CEO comes by doing this, that, and the other, they model the behavior. It's extremely rare that the new hire comes into a culture and is able to change it or systematically just beats back at it. But in the case that they do, right, they're not submitting. You've brought them through the training. They have somebody who can mentor them through the process, which is also important in transferring that knowledge, right? Who is it that you assign to this new hire to help them understand what's going on, to do their own self-assessment, to stay accountable, to share what they're learning, because maybe they're coming with a new perspective that's counterculture, right? Are you showing them how to share that without feeling like they're attacking the company and not taking one for the team? How do they navigate that as a new person coming in? Right. Once you've given them those resources, if they insist on not being one with the culture, then the emotional intelligent decision has to be, how do we disengage with team members who are counter culture, who are not good for the environment? And then HR has to have a process for that as well. You know, do we do 2 additional trainings in this area when we realize this has happened? Do we talk to 3 other members who have worked with them on projects to see if what we're thinking is what is happening? And then we get to the stage of disengaging your team member. But hopefully that process is inclusive. So one person doesn't sit down and say, I don't like how they're operating. Don't ensure that they don't make it into the second quarter, right? Because again, that sense of injustice, and we have to have principles. People have to be sure about how this thing works. So if they're not, swimming with the school upstream, then there has to be a way also to responsibly disengage that team member. And that will have implications. I mean, they may still go on social media and cuss you off, but we want to preserve the company culture that we've built here.
Definitely. How can organizations keep track of improvements in emotional intelligence? I know you mentioned some stuff a while ago, but to speak specifically on how they can monitor that.
Okay, so one of the spaces where the challenge with emotions usually comes up is in conflict. And when there is a conflict, a team leader usually knows because they're asked to mediate. And sometimes HR knows because sometimes someone is looking for a sanction for somebody who has done something that is unjust. Right. So we can look at the kinds of reports that are coming into the HR department. What language do people use when they make these reports? I hate working on this team. This person is so irresponsible. They're terrible. They're bad. I think they should be fired. I'm not going to stop until they lose their jobs. So the quality of the reports that come in, if you realize that team members are taking more and more responsibility for their role in conflict, that's a cue that EQ is building. Because one of the critical components is self-awareness. I've said before, if somebody does something and then my response is anger, emotional awareness tells me that there's something in me that is responding to what they have said. So did they say something that was out of pocket? Absolutely, right? It doesn't excuse what they have said. But I, as an intelligent creature, can decide how I respond. So blowing up and using expletives in front of customers, when I come to you to explain my behavior, if I'm saying, but they made me angry, but it's their fault because they had no right to, but they have to apologize first because if they didn't do that, I wouldn't have done this. That's an indication that EQ here is low. In this moment, it's low. But if you notice, it's more of, I did do this thing, it was wrong to do this thing. And as I think about it, I realized that I was offended that in the presence of others, they did not recognize my authority. And I think there's a better way I can deal with that. I could have probably waited until tomorrow when the situation was less tense to have that conversation and express my disappointment. I rightly should not have said what I said in front of them. So I'm going to apologize. But I'm still asking that you look at sanctioning that person for doing that, because that also can't be how we do business. Right. So if the quality of the reporting is changing, less they, and more, they did this, but I also see what my role is, right, then you can sense a growth in emotional intelligence in the team. One of the other ways you can assess that is how your team members are showing up, literally showing up for work. Do they take pride in the work that they do? Are they eager to get feedback so that they can learn and improve? Or are they running away from it? Because that's also a sign that they're not prepared for rejection. They don't have the emotional tools to deal with hearing bad news. And so they'll either decline opportunities to do hard work because what if I fail and they say something bad? I don't want to do it, right? So they either end up staying away from the hard work, or when they are engaged in something that is difficult and having a difficult time with it, they don't reach out for help, because that also requires vulnerability and believing that it's okay to need help. So if they don't have that kind of emotional awareness or tools to deal with it, you'll find that they sit down, don't deliver the work is late, you can't get an update, can't get a response, everybody timeline threw off, client is upset, we missed the date for launch, because that person didn't have the skills to ask for help. So you look at that and you see if over time, more and more persons are raising their hands and saying, you know, I said yes to 3 things this week and I really need to back down a bit. I think I've overcommitted, and the way I want my work to hit a particular standard, I can't compromise the quality of the work by doing this. I'm just letting you know if I could have this deadline moved. So that's them negotiating for what they want now. You know, they're courageous enough to say, I know I agreed to this deadline, but I'm asking for us to shift this one so I can prioritize this. That is evidence of emotional intelligence. I know I'm feeling overwhelmed and I have the tool to handle overwhelm, to ask for what I need. Definitely. Yes. Another way that you can look at grading and assessing how they're showing up is also whether or not they show up. And I had hinted at that earlier. Yeah. Are they taking a lot of days off from work? And you know when a staff member is taking a day out of spite, something happened the day before and suddenly they can't show up to work today, right? You made them work late last week. You better know that next week you're not seeing them for 3 days. They're taking it back, right? No, I'm not advocating for people not to take their leave and, their sick days if they're not feeling well. But you can tell when people are emotionally engaged or positively engaged with their work, doing a little extra doesn't feel like enslavement, right? And they don't feel the need to punish you back for asking for a little extra. Now, it only works if the team leader is also emotionally intelligent. I'll give you a direct example. I had a team leader once who sometimes she would ask very, very extreme things of you. Like you'd get a call in the morning and something is due by noon, right? And you're like, oh my God, is this even reasonable? Yeah. But you know what she would also do? The minute that closes, she says to you, I'm not putting anything else on your plate. Take a long lunch today. Go for lunch, don't come back. We got it covered. So I knew that she recognized how much sacrifice has to go into meeting a tight deadline. So when I burn myself out and I'm just like, oh, send. Whew. I know she responds to appreciate that. Right. Wow, this is really good. Seeing some errors, but I know I didn't give you enough time to do it. So I'm just going to clean that up and send it off. Really appreciate it. No need to come in tomorrow. Canceling that meeting that we had. Shifting it to next week. So she understands the emotional pressure that she's put us under, and then gives us room to just kind of calm down. Right? So that only works if you have a team leader who asks more than what the job requires of you and then responds to show that I appreciate that effort. I'm not going to take it for granted that you did this because you didn't have to do it. And this is a way that I'm demonstrating that I value it because I know that what I've asked was above and beyond. So you can see how people are responding to the above and beyond asks when they disappear after they've gone above and beyond, versus showing up again and saying, I really enjoyed showing up for the team that way. I learned this, I learned that. It was outside of my job scope. It's really not something I should have done, but I feel so good about being able to support that team member, showing up, recognizing that this person was not well, offering my skill and doing that. That's also an expression that emotional intelligence is growing in your team. Definitely. And then, of course, there's the general reports of conflict. How many inner conflict are you working with in your teams? The interpersonal conflict that you might be experiencing as well. What feedback do you get from customers? So if you have a particularly difficult set of frontline staff or customer service rep, don't laugh at the fact that, boy, you're always miserable when the customers call you close to closing time. That's not funny. It's not funny. It's a challenge. Let's see what is causing the person to answer the phone in this way when it's 5 minutes left. Let's give them some tools to deal with that. And let's measure what customer feedback is after 2 or 3 months of working with them on this. Look at the Google reviews or the Facebook reviews or the email complaints or what's coming in your text line or your chat boxes. And then you can say, boy, last week I was getting 50 reports about so and so and so. This week or this month it's down to 10, it's down to 12. Wow. That must be a sign of things changing. Let me go talk to them. Let me go encourage them. Let me give them a reward to let them know that I like this. Keep doing it. But the challenge is when we don't have a baseline, we can't tell when people are getting better.
Right.
We don't recognize that things have changed. And the 50 that is now 10, we still have room to grow, But we're quarreling about the 10, not recognizing that, wow, it's 40% better, or we've lost 40 complaints on this thing.
Right.
And so the employee that's working on it doesn't feel like you're even seeing the effort that they're putting in.
Right, so Krystal, this has been a wonderful conversation, such a delightful conversation. And the last question that I have for you to wrap things up is there anything I didn't ask that you think I should have asked, anything that I left out that you'd want to share with the audience?
Well, just a cherry I want to drop on top of the conversation, and all persons who are leading teams and not planning to quit the job anytime soon, I need you to hear this. In another 2 years, 3 years, 75% of the workplace is going to be made up of millennials. And here's why that is important. Millennials have a different operating system than generations before. We come into workspaces with a higher level of emotional awareness. We are not shy about telling you that this has compromised my mental health. We are not shy about quitting the job and roaming the streets because the job is just making me go crazy out of my mind. Exactly. We have not bought into this. Work yourself until you're dead. Don't say anything at all. Grin and bear it. We are an expressive generation. We're going to tell you what we think. And we're looking for our work to be truly valued, even if it's not in pay. But it's almost like a generation that is smarter around emotions. Now, it doesn't mean that we have better skills at expressing emotions, but at least this generation is aware of what we feel, and we feel a lot more comfortable advocating for ourselves. And that is going to change the dynamic of workspaces. It's also going to change how you're able to recruit millennials, because the paycheck is not all that we're concerned about. We want to know the corporate social responsibility of this company. When you make your profits, what do you do with it? Do you have a recycling policy? Do you have a work from home policy? How do you treat maternity leave? Is there diversity, equity, and inclusion? We are looking for different things, right? And so workspaces will have to transform or be transformed by that injection of millennial energy. So it's better to be prepared than to feel like you're forced into a hard reset with 75% ready to go and 25% still wanting to operate in the old gear. And the second thing I want us to consider too is how emotional intelligence can really improve your bottom line. So from the data that we've seen so far, there's a 70% difference in workplace output when you compare high IQ, that's your intellect, high IQ, low EQ employees. They operate at 70% less efficiency and productivity than people who have high EQ, less IQ. And that's because those with high IQ and high EQ, emotional intelligence, and lower IQ, they come with what you can call the double whopper. They have personal competence, so they have a set of skills. They know them work. So they have personal competence, and they also have social competence. They know how to work with a difficult team member and get the job done. They know how to bounce back from negative feedback and return, come again, try one more time. They know how to prioritize their work. They know how to say no to the things that compromise the quality of work. They know how to build community. And so you'll get more work out of them, higher quality work out of them. That's someone who has very high IQ, which is the competence, the personal competence, but cannot operate with enough social competence to pull people together to get work done. So it serves your bottom line, your productivity, to be able to improve, if even incrementally, the social competence of your team. You're dealing with humans in the workplace. So far, computers have not overtaken us, right? still predominantly human beings. So we need to create spaces where they are trained to improve on that social awareness and emotional intelligence.
Definitely. Krystal, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And I don't know if you want to leave the audience with any contact information for you if they want to get emotional intelligence training for their teams.
Sure. So if anybody watching is interested in improving the emotional intelligence standing of your team, you can send me an email at thesuccessfarmja@gmail.com. I'm also online at Krystal Tomlinson. You could send me a DM on Instagram if you want to, but an email is far more efficient. So it's thesuccessfarmja@gmail.com. We'll come in, deliver those trainings, design the appropriate training for you and your team, and help you to create what I call a workspace that has courage as its default. Bravery to speak up, to share what's on my mind, to give meaningful feedback, to receive feedback and still want to show up in my full self. Right. The more courage we have in workspaces, it's the more productivity, the more authenticity, and a safer culture for all of us to exist in.
Definitely. Thank you so much again, Krystal.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
And thank you, audience.